This short video introduces the quick individual risk assessment available at travsafe.com.au/QIRA. It is aimed at assisting inexperienced travellers and particularly first-time travellers to get a basic indication of the risk of travel at a location and from the activities that they will undertake whilst on holiday. I'll explain how Meg used the tool to identify ways of making her planned visit to Sri Lanka safer and more enjoyable. Meg is a 20-year-old university student. She's travelled to Bali with family before, but she's never travelled on her own, and she's never travelled to Sri Lanka. Meg will travel with her university friend Sally. Meg and Sally want to see the elephants and leopards in Yala National Park. They also want to see a number of hotels and other locations in Colombo that were recommended by friends. This is a simple but robust tool which focuses on risks for female travellers, which are higher in Sri Lanka than in some other parts of the world. Risks from adventure activities such as, in this case, whitewater rafting, but perhaps in other instances would include scuba diving, bungee jumping and skiing. Risks to travellers from crime, poor roads, lower safety standards in general. Because Meg and Sally plan to visit Yala National Park, that's a 6-hour drive from Colombo on some very challenging roads, obviously a high risk activity. Now this tool is optimised to emphasise that better planning can reduce uncertainty, increase safety and even lower travel costs. Meg filled in the online form and noted on her sheet that she is travelling with Sally, not travelling alone. This means that it's an inherently safer trip than would otherwise be the case if she was travelling on her own as a female traveller. She is leaving Colombo and heading into a remote area. Those two facts are recorded on the sheet. She is insured, and she has told her insurance company that she's going whitewater rafting. That's essential in order to make sure that insurance is not invalidated. Meg did not see her travel doctor before she left, which exposes her to some risks. As a result, some things she'll have to manage on the fly, such as the risk of dengue, malaria and chikungunya. Meg has not pre-booked accommodation and transport, which that exposes them to further risks because they consider that they can use public transport the whole way through. The pair are away for 16 days, which exceeds the 2-week limit, thus meaning they are exposed to the risks of Sri Lanka for a longer period of time. And finally, both Meg and Sally are carrying 2 credit or debit cards through which they can access their funds. Meg's spare card is with Sally and vice versa, in case one of them is robbed or skimmed, with skimming being the more likely outcome in Sri Lanka. All up, these factors push the proposed travel from a low-medium risk to a low-elevated risk. On the understanding that this is not a low-risk activity, Meg then completed the long individual risk assessment, which is available at travsafe.com.au/LIRA. Through the longer assessment, Meg was able to identify high-risk activities and draw up a plan to reduce the risks of greatest concern, which was the trip to Yala National Park, this green area here on the southeastern side of the island. Meg hired a car and driver through a reputable company and booked accommodation when outside Colombo. This was the highest risk activity the girls were exposed to, and this action significantly lowered the travel risk involved in the visit. Hiring a driver reduced the scope for travel at night and in areas off the beaten track. The pair booked accommodation for their first 2 days and last day in Colombo, which also included airport transfers. Sally and Meg ended up with a more robust travel plan for the south, but retained the flexibility to try different boutique hotels and guest houses in Colombo without being locked into pre-existing bookings for places that may well have not suited them. I hope this information is helpful. More information on travel risk assessments, including the detailed instructions on how to use